Hello, my name is Logan Shaw, and I'm going to be reviewing Metropolis and Dr. Caligari's Cabinet. So first I want to start off with what German Expressionism is. German Expressionism was a movement of German filmmaking in the 1920s characterized by distorted visuals, exaggerated sets, dramatic lighting, and non-realistic performance to convey an inner psychological offer with a dark atmosphere. The director of Metropolis, which is the first movie we're going to talk about, is Fritz Lang, and it was introduced in 1927. Brief summary of the film. Okay, so this film talks about the realism of what it means to be in a society that is overdriven by leaders who believe that machines are better than people. So the way it opens is a beautiful city set in like a metropolis type thing, which is why it's called Metropolis, and it's a bunch of people who are in a better fanciful way of life because of the workers down below that they don't know about, that Freder doesn't know about either, that Joe Freder does, that Rotwang does, but Freder doesn't. That's good. This is a good. That's a key thing to sort of remember that. So basically, the story goes into the heroism side of Freder, who is sheltered from knowing about the workers down below, that wants to create
No, we're not hearing that back.
who wants to create a sense of peace throughout workers and the top level, which is citygoers. And he does this with the help of Maria. Maria is this kind of minister that ministers to these down below workers, and they listen to her, and she's kind of like a leader down there, and they're waiting for what's called a mediator to come and unite the two, the city and the workers. So let's go through with the characters. Let's talk about the characters real quick. Joe Fredersen is a business leader and the father of Freder. He is not necessarily the villain. He's more like a misunderstood guy. He is wanting to keep Freder away from the known fact of the city down below. And he doesn't want her to know because it's kind of like a painful side of what Rotwang, and we'll talk about him in a minute, has to do with it. Freder is the son of Joe Freder. I'm sorry. Freder is the son of Joe Fredersen, and he is kind of like this guy who is happy-go-lucky young buck. He plays with. He's kind of like a bachelor. He plays with women. He is free. He can do whatever he wants until he realizes what is really going on down below. He sees what is unthinkable in some senses, the destruction of humankind. See, the thing is, when you think about humankind, the thing that comes to matter is what would happen if humankind was taken over by machines, and this whole thing, what Rotwang is planning to do, is really nasty, and it's the future that is behold unless something is done. So, speaking of Rotwang, I believe, is the antagonist of this film. He's a scientist who believes that robots are better than man, that robots can do better than what man can control. So, just to get rid of the workers entirely and to put everyone in terms of robots in the place of those workers. Now, Maria, we were talking about Maria, but let's just go into a little bit more about Maria. Maria is a woman who believes that there's a way out of what the workers are going through, who sympathizes with the workers, who is in terms of the word at peace with the idea of peace rather than mayhem, who believes there's a peaceful way to get to where they need to go, and that believes that there's a mediator. And that's the thing about this film is the idea of this film is to show the peace through something that can bring us together, something in between that could bring us together, bring the workers to the surface and have them come together as one. So the robot Maria is the robot Maria is entirely different. She's a robot that believes that in terms of what Rotwing has programmed her to believe, that mayhem and destruction is the way to get to where you want to be. Is the way you want to get to, is the way you want to get to freedom. Is the way you want to get to where you want to be in terms of who is actually in control. Now, that doesn't mean that doesn't really take away from the film in terms of what actually is going on, because Rotwing shows is reflected in that. He's reflected in the mayhem and the crazed and the just the outputness of what it is to be in an unorderly fashion. So, yeah. Okay, so then I'm gonna go off the questions here. In your opinion, who or what was the protagonist of the film? Make sure you address the goal of the protagonist and explain who or what stood in their way. Was the protagonist successful in achieving their goal? Okay, so I think the protagonist was Maria. The main protagonist, I mean, because she remained faithful to her standputs all the way through. And even though Freder is there to be the hero too, I believe they're both heroes, but I think Maria holds the cake because she eventually does get what she wants in a way that's unexpected. But Freder is kind of like that second hero to her, to the person that is the mediator through all of this. And Maria knows that he's the mediator through all of this, and chooses and notices that in him. And they both together make the protagonist list because they both actually kind of get their way at the end of the film. Now, it does end up in destruction, but it's in a way ended in peace, because the protagonist how the protagonist held the control of what was going on down below and made it something that they can reflect upon up above. So, in the midst of all the destruction that the workers were doing, the protagonist was saving the children from, a flood that was happening down below. And when that came to be, the peace rang through, because when there's a lot of different things that go on, like for instance, the machines that they're destroying, the flood, the saving of the children, they called the robot Maria a witch, so they put her at the stake and watched her burn, and it ended up being the robot Maria, thankfully. And again, it doesn't end in terms of peace, but it ends in terms of victory. And that means that a lot of the things that happen in the film are done, and all the good things that happen throughout the film are initiated by Freder and Maria. Freder wants the betterness of the people to be up top, and so does Maria. Maria believes in that whole thing of peace between two companies, and the mediation source that was Freder. So again, that's what I think. That's kind of what I think in terms of that. In your opinion, who or what was the antagonist? Make sure you address the goal of the antagonist and explain who or what stood in their way. Was the antagonist successful in achieving their goal? Okay, so we have Rotwing. He's kind of the main antagonist. You think Joe Freder would be the main antagonist, but no, he's misunderstood. Rotwing is in control of a robot-making machine, one that would take away humans and add robots to the machines that are powering the city above. And Rotwing who stood in his way is really Freder and Maria, because they wanted peace in terms of mayhem. And Rotwing had to think quickly before anything happened to his plan of creating machines that run the world below and really mistreating the workers down below. And that's the thing that comes to mind when you think about Rotwing. His mind is set on machines. What if machines were built in terms of betterment for people? And that seems like a messed up thing to do, because people control machines. Machines don't control machines. You know what I mean? So I think Rotwing wasn't successful in meeting his goal because he tried to stop it by initiating violence between the world above and the world below. But here's the thing, it stopped right when they realized the truth. So he didn't get his way because when the workers realized the truth, they came together and it made peace in some fashion. So, okay? So the next question: describe the two worlds that exist in Metropolis. They include their vast differences. Also explain how the two worlds are linked. Okay, so the first world is the city above, Metropolis. It's kind of like a grays of heaven be with a lot of different technological features that are in the city above, and it's like a luxury almost compared to the city down below. And the thing with the city above is it explores the ways of what it means to be in this city of people who are blessed to have the technologies that they have, and the below with people who are working the technologies that are maybe like really old, and they're working it all day and living in that same scape of working, and it kind of reflects what would be like a factory known to just forced labor on people, not necessarily one to give an and not necessarily one to give and excavate a profit for the workers below. And that's something that is kind of cool that comes to mind when I think about the two vast differences. One's technological, one feeds the technological features up above, and the interlinking thing between them is human. They're both human. You know what I mean? It's not machines working machines. It's humans working machines and humans benefiting from those machines. So. Which of the following do you view the main nexus of the film? Workers versus owners, men versus women, technological progress. Well, technological progress versus technological trauma. Okay, so let's start with the first one, workers versus owners. So I think there's like a fine line between what would make it the most important thing. There's a lot of things that go on in this whole thing. It's how we can view a community. You know what I mean? So the nexus would be well, the next would probably be technological progress versus technological trauma, because that's the main thing we're doing. It's basically kind of creating a sense of no, people need to be together. People need to be together. So it goes back to technological progress versus technological trauma, but it also goes back to workers versus owners. No worker should have an owner. There should be a sense of precedence in terms of what we see as owners in the world of Metropolis. There should be unity in terms of that. There should be work that should be fair in terms of that. There's no in between. And the thing is, when you think about this film, it's really opening the idea of a mediator, like I said, one that can bring men and women of all kinds together. And the idea of workers versus owners is very present in the film, and so is technological progress versus technological trauma. Because when you take the robot and turn it against people, that's technological trauma. I mean, there's a lot of technological progress above, but below, it just feeds off of very, very old machines that are willing to manipulate men and women to think that they're no better than the people up above. But Maria comes in and stops them from thinking that. So both those things, I think, are the main nexus of the film. Joe Fredrickson sheltered his son from the situation of the workers, but Frederick discovers it anyway, which triggers him an awakening in him. Why, in your opinion, does John want to protect his son from discovering the truth of the underworld? Is he bad father for protecting his son from pain, misery, sickness, and death? Okay, so this whole thing goes back to the whole thing of what is true. what is real. And Joe Ferguson did not want his son to see that. And I think he did it so he can kind of continue the life that he wants him to live, which is a happy-go-lucky free life. And he doesn't want him to worry about things that are below him, because that's what makes him worry. The fact that his son worries. And I think that that's one of the main reasons why this film is so interesting, because it explains the dynamic of a relationship that's really what all people can relate to if in said circumstance. But that idea of love that he has for his son is something that's great, because at the end of the day, he really does love his son, and he wants him to live, not survive. And I don't think it's making him a bad father. I think it's just misunderstood. I think it makes him a father that doesn't understand how to address the situations down below, and that makes him kind of like a confused character to follow in some cases, because his intentions aren't bad, but his actions are. So you can kind of say it's in the middle of him being a bad father, or whether or not he has goals of being a good father, which he does at the end of the film. He sees the good in trying to help people, based on Frederick's model of what it means to help. Metropolis has been called a science fiction film. How does this movie set precedents for all other sections? How does this movie set precedents? Let me try that again. Metropolis has been called the first science fiction film. How does this movie set precedents for all the other science fiction films? What images are repeated about in modern American films of the same genre? Okay, so first of all, I want to say how the movies are based off this iRobot. There's a lot of movies based off like the idea of technology overcoming man, but that's not what this movie's about. It's not necessarily what this movie's about. It is kind of a science fiction model, though, but it's not that much of a model. Let me explain. So, science fiction has to do with the ideas of science and unaltered fiction. So when it comes together, it makes what's known as science fiction. So when you base things off of things that are make believe, like robots, uh, big cities, technologies that are forever progressing, the idea of human mind and matter, that's a science fiction film. And what that has to do with this whole thing is it made it so that science fiction can be present in and not a main theme, but present in the film that we see here. I would say this film is kind of like a science fiction film in itself, because it features themes of hope. It features themes of technological progress, both in the city up above and the robots down below, and it shows the idea of all the culmination coming together into one big ideal of, well, what's set in terms of what a science fiction movie presents, which is the idea of hope over the machines, or hope over what's present in terms of technological progress. And that comes together in such a way that is beautiful, and Sling does it really good. So, okay, so that was the report. That was the review of Metropolis. Now I'm going to be talking about The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Hello, I'm going to be doing a review on The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. The movie was made by The movie was directed by Robert Wynn and made in 1919. Brief summary of the film. The film is about a young man who is telling a story about a man named Dr. Caligari. And Dr. Caligari is a doctor who is believed to control Cesare, a man in control and desirable of death of Dr. Caligari in terms of what he wants, quote unquote, the sleepwalker to do. And it just tells the overall story of man and his presidents on making a crazy society. Cesare is a sleepwalker and control of Dr. Caligari, and he's portrayed through a lot of different things in terms of, showing off a human who's in control or a slave to Dr. Caligari, who is in control in terms of telling him what to do, in terms of what he wants Caesarea to do, and it ends up going really, really bad for Dr. Caligari at the end of the day because he ends up being put in a straitjacket, and he ends up being answering for the terrors that he's done to society as a whole. And Caesarea is in most cases aiming to walk the earth and just be half dead, half awake, half asleep. Okay, so Alan is a young man who is murdered by Caesarea, who actually has a well, hang on. Before we go on to that, Caesarea is I already said this, but Caesarea is a half asleep, half awake man controlled by Dr. Caligari by being placed in the cabinet of his predecessor. In some cases, he's dragged into control of Dr. Caligari. So he's dragged into murdering Alan. He's dragged into making hectic things happen beyond the city. He's just a monster in his own right, Dr. Caligari, and Caesarea as a combined nature. Alan is a curious young man and murdered by Caesarea, and because of that, because he's murdered by Caesarea, and because Caesarea almost killed a woman, he gets caught by the authorities. And that's where this comes in. Dr. Caligari is a crazy scientist who is believed to want control of a person and a man of a society. So he is a doctor that is crazed in terms of what he wants in terms of a society. He wants control over man, and he gets control over man with Caesarea. He places him in a coffin more often than a cabinet and makes him do his bidding. Okay, so, in your opinion, who or what was the protagonist of the film? Make sure you address the goal of the protagonist and explain who or what stood in their way. Okay, so the protagonists would be the people who found out that Caesarea was being used as a token to get control and to kill those people who don't want that control. So his killing of Alan, his almost killing of a woman, his constant terrorizing of the city was all stopped by the leaders in control, the police officers in control, who ended up taking him and putting him in, an asylum, essentially. The antagonist of this film is Dr. Caligari, based on a story. So we see Dr. Caligari take control of a man, show him off in the circus, and then push the narrative control towards the city by taking the man that's in the cabinet and having him kill people who are outside of the goal of Dr. Caligari's whole agenda. So that's that. How does the expressionist setting of Caligari give rise to feelings of discomfort that could be constructed as uncanny or haunted? Okay, so whenever you see a close-up of Dr. Caligari, it gives you discomfort. You see his dirty face. You see the close-up of Caesarea. You see his face. It freaks you out. The overall tension of the film freaks people out. Like the music set and the tone of the film freaks people out. All this together makes a very haunting tale. Like if you know anything about horror movies, it has to have features of haunts and features of uncomfortable settings. Like for instance, when you see a ghost face, it's uncomfortable. When you see Chucky, it's uncomfortable. When you see what's it called? Jason, it's uncomfortable. When you see Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street, it's uncomfortable. These things are meant to do that, to present that. The music, the uncomfortable setting, the uncomfortable faces in terms of the setting, it's just all made up to me uncanny and haunted. Just to name a few examples. In terms of political metaphor of Germany at the time, who or what is Caesarea and what does he represent? Okay, so this was World War I era. So that being said, there's a lot of self reflection on what Germany was to be. And I think this more is a metaphor of politically at the time what Germany would become, which is a highly militarized, brainwashed city, town, country by, what would be known as the Nazis. So I think at the time it presents the future for what Germany's gonna do, you know, in the future sense. It's a warning. It's like a warning sign. Don't do this or this will happen. So, explain the moment you believe the narrator to be unreliable. Can you think of a modern American movie that has an unreliable narrative to help tell shape a story? No movie comes to mind, but I would say that I didn't believe the narrator as soon as he came back on the screen. The movie starts with a man talking to another man about Dr. Caligari, and he begins to kind of show his true colors when you see the narrator again. You know what I mean? Why is he being shown again? You know what I mean? So I think this movie has a lot to do with the idea of reliability, and this story being told by a man is unreliable in some senses, because you see now the true Dr. Caligari coming into full escape in terms of review, and he no longer has that face of like really dirty, really icky, really unsettling features. So the Cabinet Dr. Caligari has been called the first true horror film. How does this movie precedence for all other horror films? What images, themes, and ideas are borrowed in modern American films within the same genre? So, I mean, when you think about horror films, you have to think about three things: the tenseness of the movie, the uncomfortable setting of the movie, and the setting of the music in the movie. So, all three of these things come to play by a lot of ongoing ideas. Like, the music is unsettling, the picture is unsettling, the men in the story that are actually the villains are unsettling. Like, everything about this film shows what a future, monster film would be. If you know anything about monster movies, like Frankenstein, like Invisible Man, like Creature of the Black Lagoon, they're unsettling pieces of undesirable traits that they have based on their expressions, their vocal expressions, a lot of other things. The theme, which is control, that's something that's unsettling in this film. And I mean, there's a lot of things in this film that made the precedence of what monster films are, and monster films made the precedence of what horror films will be in the future. So I think it is a true horror film because there's a lot of unsettling moments in this film. The killing of Alan, the entering of the monster in a woman's flat, the control of Cesare, the facial features of Dr. Caligari and Cesare. There's a lot of things that go on, and it's unsettling in that movie, and also the idea of trying to fight against that craziness in terms of town-ridden chaos. So I'm gonna give my rating of the films that are entitled. So Metropolis first. I believe that this film is like maybe 4 to 5 thumbs up because of the uses of the story, because of how it ends up being a beautiful setting for what's to come in the story. It's a theme that people can come back to and say, okay, this is how we feel about it. Now let's continue to put this into action. And now the review for Dr. Caligari's. It's a movie that really tells the story of what it can mean to be in control. And even though the story is kind of overexpressed, just like Metropolis, it's still a good story to follow through. And it's a movie that I think that a lot of people would enjoy if they're really big movie buffs. if they want to learn more about how the monster movies came to be in America, then they would have to go to this film. So I would give this film a 4 out of 5. So thank you for letting me review these films, and I hope you find these videos very intriguing.